Well, hello everybody and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to be starting a 10-day process for making Amish friendship bread. Now, Amish friendship bread it gets its name from Amish obviously, but I don't think that this particular bread or cake is an Amish thing. I think it's more the process which gives it its name, and that is that over a period of 10 days you develop a starter dough, and then after 10 days you have more than you need for what you want to bake that day, and so you give the rest to friends so that they can bake as well. So I think that's where its name comes from, but I can't be certain. So basically what it is that you make a dough, a starter dough, and then you look after that for 10 days, adding more flour and sugar and milk on the 6th day. And then after 10 days, the starter dough is ready to be added to the other ingredients to make the bread. So for the starter dough, I have 128 grams of all-purpose flour, plain flour. That's 1 cup. I give cups because I've got this recipe from America basically, or they're all pretty much the same. I also have 200 grams of sugar, caster sugar, which is 1 cup of sugar, 240 millilitres of milk, which is 1 cup of milk, 60 millilitres of water, which is 1/4 cup of water, and I've got that at about 43 degrees Celsius, 110 Fahrenheit. And into that I'm going to put 7 grams or 1 packet of active dried yeast. And I'm actually just going to take a little bit of the sugar and sprinkle that onto the yeast as well. I'm going to mix that around, and I'm then going to leave that yeast to activate for 10 minutes. It should froth up, and then in 10 minutes time I'll be back and we'll go on to the next stage. Okay, well, I'm back with you, and the one thing I want to say straight away while I think about it is that all the recipes I've read tell us that you should not use any metal implements at all in this recipe. So glass, ceramic or plastic or silicone is the way to go with this. I don't know the reason why. Now, as you can see, our yeast has activated and frothed up nicely. So the next thing I'm going to do is to put the sugar and the flour into a larger bowl, and I'm just going to give those a stir around, and into those I'm going to pour the milk and the activated yeast. And I'm going to stir those around and get them combined. And it doesn't really matter if there are some lumps in the flour, because over the next 10 days the yeast is going to work wonders on the mixture. So basically that's all there is to the mixing part. And then the next thing to do is to store that for 10 days. Now I'm going to put it into a large Ziploc bag, and each day we're going to have to do some work with it. Very little work, but some work. So I'll just transfer this into the bag if I can without making too much of a mess. Well, that went rather better than I expected. And then I'm going to close the bag up, and we're just going to leave that. Now, you could leave it in a bowl and cover it with a tea towel or something like that, or plastic wrap, but in a bag is easier for me. And what will happen is that over the next 24 hours this bag will start to expand as the gas is released from the yeast. So then you simply open the bag, let the air out. Now we'll count this as day 1 of the process. So then on day 2, day 3, day 4 and day 5, you need to take your batter and you need to mash it around like that. And of course let the gas out. And then on day 6 you need to add more sugar, milk and flour. And day 7, 8 and 9 you mash it again, and day 10 is when you start making the actual bread or cake. And on day 6 what you need to do is open your starter dough and put in 200 grams of caster sugar, that's 1 cup, 240 millilitres of milk, 1 cup, and 128 grams of plain flour, that's 1 cup, and you mix that all together into the starter dough, and that is day 6. You close your dough up again, or you cover your dough again, and then you do the mashing. Now I will do that before I come back to you and show you how we get on with making the cake. Well, it's now day 10 of our Amish friendship bread process, and we're ready to actually make the bread. So here's my starter dough, which I added the additional ingredients to in on day 6, and that is now enough for 4 recipes at least. And the idea is that we're going to use 240 millilitres of that, and the rest of it you can freeze if you want to, but the idea is supposed to be, this is the friendship part, you share that with friends so that they can make the bread as well. And so I'll go through the rest of the ingredients. I have 256 grams of plain flour, I have 120 grams of raisins, they're optional, I have 100 grams of chopped pecans, that's optional as well. I have 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, half a teaspoon of baking soda and half a teaspoon of salt. I have 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 240 millilitres, that's 1 cup of oil, 120 millilitres, half a cup of milk. I have 200 grams of caster sugar, 1 cup again. I have 3 medium eggs, that would be large in the USA, and I have about a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Additionally, I have 50 grams of caster sugar and half a teaspoon of cinnamon, which I'm going to use on my pan, or 2 loaf pans in fact. So I also have here 2 packets of something called Angel Delight. Now the recipes that I read all call for instant pudding. Well, in the UK we don't really get instant pudding, so I'm using Angel Delight, which is a sort of a substitute for it, so that would be fine. Now the other thing I'm going to do before I start is I'm going to take a little bit of my flour and I'm going to put the raisins into it, and I'm going to stir it around. I want to coat the raisins with flour, and that is because sometimes when you're making this sort of cake or bread, the heavy things like raisins can sink to the bottom, and often coating them in flour just avoids that a little bit for you. So I'll do that and set that aside. Now I should say I have my oven preheating at 165 Celsius, that's 145 Celsius with a fan, 325 Fahrenheit. And what I'm going to do is start mixing our ingredients together. So the first thing I'm going to do is to take 240 millilitres of my starter, and for that I'm going to use a measuring cup and measure out 240 millilitres, and there it is. I'll put that into my bowl. I'll close that up again, ready to share. And to that I'm going to add 3 medium eggs, my oil and the milk, and then I'm just going to give that a little whisk together to get that incorporated. Get the yolks broken up. And then I'm going to put my ground cinnamon, my baking powder, baking soda and salt in with the flour, and I'm going to give that a bit of a mix round as well. And into that I'm going to tip my dry Angel Delight. Now this weighs about 118 grams, these two packets combined, and from what I've read I seem to think the amount of instant pudding powder, 2 packets, would be about 110 grams, so it's about the same. And I'm going to mix that around as well. And then I'm going to put the vanilla extract and my sugar into the wet mixture and just give those a good stir around. And finally that flour mixture. And I think that's as much as we need to do with it. So I'm just going to set that aside for a moment. Oh, of course, he says that's not as much as we need to do, because we need to add in our optional raisins and pecans. But before that, I'm just going to take my sugar and cinnamon mixture and I'm going to coat my greased loaf tins with it, and I want to try to avoid making too much mess. So having coated the tins, I'll put the excess sugar away because I'm going to sprinkle that on the top of the batter once it's in these tins. So I'll just set the tins aside again, and we'll stir in our raisins and our chopped pecans. And then we want to put that into our loaf tins fairly evenly. These are slightly different sizes. They're both £2 tins, but they're slightly different sizes. That's just the way of the world. That's what people do. So I'm just going to do it like this. And then I'll just scrape the excess in. And just level them off a little bit. They seem to find their own level. And then I'm going to bake those in the oven for about an hour until a skewer poked into the centre comes out clean. And then I'll take them out, let them cool in the pans a little bit before I turn them out. And oh, the last thing I forgot to do was to sprinkle my sugar over the top. That's the cinnamon sugar. So I'll let them cool down before I take them out of the tins, then I'll let them cool completely and I'll come back and show you the results. Okay, well I'm back with you, and our loaves have baked in the oven. I baked them for an hour and the skewer came out clean, and I've cut one of them, and I've already had a taste, but I'll have another taste now. Very, very light. It does taste good. There was cinnamon, ground cinnamon in it, but I used strawberry Angel Delight, and you can actually just taste a little bit of that flavour coming through as well, I think. Nice and moist. As I said, you don't have to put raisins and pecans in. You don't have to put anything in if you don't want to. And you can mix and match, put different fruits in. It does take a while to make, as I said, 10 days from start to finish. But then you do have more starter dough left if you want to freeze it in little packs of 240 millilitres if you're not going to share it with friends. So that's it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below the video. and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that would take you to the recipe on my blog, and in fact all the recipes on my blog. There's a search there that you can search for anything and it will come up if I've done it. And I will be back with you with another video in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.